After 70 years of life and 45 years of raising my children in that house, my son expected me to sleep among the garden tools and old paint cans. I clutched the deed to the property, feeling the weight of the decision I had made. A decision that would leave him standing on the sidewalk with nothing but a key to an empty house. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. You might wonder how a mother of 70 could be banished to the garage of her own home by her eldest son. The journey from beloved matriarch to unwanted inconvenience didn't happen overnight, though the final insult certainly felt like it could shatter my world in an instant. I've had countless hours to reflect on the moments I missed, the subtle changes I dismissed. Perhaps I was blinded by unconditional maternal love, or maybe I simply couldn't believe that my own child, the baby I'd rocked through countless colicky nights, the boy whose skinned knees I'd bandaged, the teenager I'd taught to drive in that very driveway, the young man whose college tuition I'd paid with money from selling my late husband's vintage car collection, would methodically erase my presence from the home I had maintained for nearly 5 decades. My name is Margaret Thornton. For 45 years after my husband Richard passed away when David was just 12, I've been the cornerstone of our family: mother, father, provider, counselor, and caretaker. We were an unbreakable team, my 3 children and I, against whatever challenges life threw our way. I worked days as a school librarian at Lincoln Elementary, checking out books and inspiring a love of reading in generations of children. My evenings were spent managing the books for 3 local businesses to make ends meet. Every spare moment was devoted to ensuring David, Susan, and Michael never felt the devastating void of a father's absence or the crushing limitations of a widow's modest income. I sacrificed willingly, passionately, because that's what love demands of a parent. I turned down every invitation to dinner, every potential romance, choosing instead to sit through endless baseball games where David pitched no-hitters, through Susan's ballet recitals where she danced with surprising grace, through Michael's science fairs where his inventions always seemed to malfunction at the last moment. I wore the same winter coat for 12 consecutive years, its cuffs fraying and buttons mismatched, so my children could have new ones each season. When college acceptance letters arrived, I didn't hesitate to take a second mortgage on our modest Maple Street home, postponing my own financial security to invest in their futures. Watching my children transform from awkward teenagers into confident, ambitious adults filled me with indescribable joy. David, my eldest, followed his father's footsteps into engineering, securing a position at Westfield Technologies right after graduation. Susan became a physical therapist, her natural empathy making her beloved by patients recovering from surgeries and accidents. Michael, my youngest, surprised us all by becoming a successful chef, his childhood kitchen experiments evolving into culinary artistry at a downtown restaurant. For years, Sunday dinners at my house remained sacred. No matter how busy their lives became, my children gathered around my oak dining table, the same table Richard and I had purchased as newlyweds, to share meals and stories. I'd spend all day preparing their favorites: pot roast for David, vegetable lasagna for Susan, and my special apple pie that Michael claimed no restaurant dessert could match. The changes began subtly, almost imperceptibly, when David married Elaine. She was beautiful in that polished, professional way, a marketing executive with perfectly manicured nails and a wardrobe that screamed success. Their courtship was a whirlwind of business conferences where they'd met, charity galas where they'd networked, and weekend getaways to destinations I'd only read about in magazines. "Mom, Elaine thinks we should have a destination wedding," David mentioned during one Sunday dinner. "Something intimate in the Bahamas." "The Bahamas?" I echoed, trying to mask my disappointment. I'd always imagined watching David marry in our local church where his father and I had exchanged vows 47 years earlier. Just immediate family. he continued, his eyes brightening with excitement. Elaine's parents are thrilled. They've already booked the resort. That sounds lovely. I managed, though my heart sank at the thought of my son marrying in a place I couldn't afford to visit. Will Susan and Michael be able to attend? David hesitated. Well, that's the thing, Mom. The resort is pretty exclusive. We're limited on guest numbers. In the end, I watched my eldest son marry via a choppy video call that Susan set up on her laptop. The Caribbean sunshine made the screen difficult to see, and the sound cut out during their vows. But I clapped and cheered anyway, my eyes fixed on the tiny figure of my son in a white linen suit, standing beside a bride I barely knew. After the wedding, Sunday dinners became monthly, then quarterly events. David was always busy with work trips, networking opportunities, or renovations on the 4-bedroom colonial they'd purchased in Hillcrest Estates, the affluent neighborhood across town where doctors, lawyers, and executives built homes with professional landscaping and 3-car garages. When they announced Elaine's pregnancy, I was overjoyed. A grandchild. I immediately began knitting blankets, researching the safest cribs, and setting aside a small savings account for the baby's future education. Mom, we've been meaning to talk to you, David said during one of his increasingly rare visits. Elaine's parents have offered to pay for the nursery design. They've hired an interior specialist from New York. That's generous of them, I replied, trying to hide my disappointment. I'd spent weeks sketching ideas for a cozy nursery with a reading nook where I could rock my grandchild to sleep. I've been working on some blankets and a mobile. About that, David shifted uncomfortably. Elaine is very particular about the nursery aesthetic. Everything needs to coordinate with the designer's vision. But maybe you could make something. For here? For when the baby visits? I nodded, swallowing hard. Of course, dear. Whatever makes Elaine happy. Little Emma was born on a rainy Tuesday in April. I waited anxiously by the phone, having been told that the delivery room would only accommodate Elaine's parents. When the call finally came, David sounded exhausted but happy. She's perfect, Mom. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. They're both resting now. When can I meet her? I asked, already reaching for my car keys. Maybe this weekend? Elaine needs to recover, and her mother is staying with us for the first few days to help. The weekend became the following week, then stretched to 2 weeks before I was finally invited to meet my granddaughter. When I arrived, carrying a small stuffed bear I'd sewn myself and a casserole for the new parents, Elaine's mother answered. The door. Margaret, come in, she said with practiced politeness. They're in the living room. Please use the hand sanitizer first. Doctor's orders. Emma was indeed perfect. Tiny fingers, rosebud lips, and a wisp of dark hair like her father's. When David carefully placed her in my arms, I felt that familiar surge of love that had overwhelmed me when I'd first held him 42 years earlier. She has your eyes, I whispered, watching as Emma's tiny hand curled around my finger. Actually, she has Elaine's mother's eyes, corrected Elaine from the sofa, where she sat scrolling through her phone. Everyone at the hospital commented on it. As the months passed, my visits to see Emma became exercises in restraint. Elaine had strict rules about feeding schedules, acceptable toys, and even how to speak to the baby. Full sentences only, no baby talk. My suggestions based on raising 3 children were met with polite but dismissive references to parenting books and pediatrician recommendations. Then came the job offer that changed everything. David was promoted to senior engineer, but the position required relocation to their company's headquarters in Boston, 300 miles away. It's an incredible opportunity, Mom, he explained over the phone. The salary is double what I'm making now, plus stock options and an executive benefits package. That's wonderful, I said automatically, though my heart was already calculating the distance, the cost of travel, the birthdays and holidays I would miss. When would you move? That's why I'm calling. The company needs me to start next month, and we found the perfect house in Brookline. The thing is, he paused, we need to sell our house here quickly. The market's hot right now, and our realtor says we could get top dollar if we list immediately. I'm sure you'll find a buyer right away, I assured him, trying to sound supportive. Actually, Mom, we were thinking, what if you bought our house? You're always saying your place is too big for just you now that we're all gone. Our house is newer, has better security, and it's in a great neighborhood. The suggestion caught me off guard. My modest home on Maple Street had been my sanctuary for 45 years. It held Richard's memory in every corner, the height marks of growing children on the kitchen doorframe, the garden he'd designed, the workshop where he'd taught David to build his first birdhouse. I don't think I could afford Hillcrest Estates, I said carefully, and I love my home. We'd give you a family discount, David pressed. And think about it, you'd be maintaining the house for us. If we ever moved back, we wouldn't have to buy new. The conversation ended with my promise to consider it, but I had no intention of leaving my home. Still, something in David's tone troubled me, a sense that he'd already set plans in motion. A week later, he and Elaine appeared on my doorstep unannounced. They sat at my kitchen table, spreadsheets and documents spread before them. Mom, we've run the numbers, David began without preamble. If you sell this house, which frankly needs a lot of work, and add your savings, you could buy our place with a very small mortgage. We've already spoken to our bank. You spoke to a bank about my finances? I asked, stunned. Just preliminarily, Elaine interjected smoothly. We're trying to help Margaret. This neighborhood is declining in value, while Hillcrest continues to appreciate. It's a sound investment for your retirement. I looked around my beloved kitchen, at the worn countertops Richard had installed, the window box where I grew herbs, the sunlight that streamed across the breakfast nook at exactly the right angle each morning. This is my home, I said simply. I appreciate your concern, but I'm not interested in moving. David's expression hardened slightly. Mom, be practical. This house is falling apart. The roof needs replacing, the furnace is ancient, and those stairs will become impossible for you in a few years. We're worried about you. I'm only 70, David, not 90. I can manage stairs just fine. The discussion grew increasingly tense, with David pointing out every flaw in my home while emphasizing the prestige and convenience of Hillcrest Estates. When I remained firm in my refusal, he abruptly changed tactics. What if we bought your house instead, as an investment property? You could stay here until you're ready to move into something more appropriate for your age. The phrase, more appropriate for your age, stung more than I let show. Behind his words, I heard the unspoken truth. My son saw me as declining, diminishing, becoming less, a problem to be managed rather than a person to be respected. I'm not selling my home, I stated firmly. And I'm not buying yours. You'll find a buyer quickly in this market. They left shortly after, David frustrated, and Elaine coldly polite. As their car disappeared down the street, I felt the first fracture in what I'd always believed was an unbreakable bond with my firstborn. The Boston move proceeded as planned. Emma, now walking and babbling her first words, was whisked away before I could establish the grandmother relationship I'd dreamed of. Video calls were scheduled, then canceled, rescheduled and cut short. Promised visits never materialized. Then, 6 months after they'd relocated, I received a surprising call from David. Mom, great news. I've been transferred back to the regional office temporarily. A special project needs my expertise for about 3 months. That's wonderful. Will Elaine and Emma come too? I asked, already mentally preparing the spare bedroom and dusting off children's books for Emma. Actually, they'll stay in Boston. The schools are better there, and Elaine has joined some important committees she can't leave. But I was hoping... He paused. I was hoping I could stay with you. Hotels for 3 months would be expensive, and it would give us time together. Joy surged through me at the prospect of having my son home again. Of course, I'll get your old room ready right away. The first week of David's stay rekindled something of our old relationship. We ate breakfast together, catching up on family news. He seemed genuinely interested in my library work and asked about old neighbors. I prepared his favorite meals, relishing the opportunity to care for my child again, even if that child was now a 42-year-old executive. But as the second week began, subtle changes appeared. David worked late most evenings, arriving home only to retreat to his room with a brief greeting. He began leaving messes in the kitchen, his bathroom, the living room. Small discourtesies that accumulated like snowflakes before an avalanche. "The water pressure in this shower is terrible," he complained one morning. "And the Wi-Fi keeps dropping. How can you live like this?" By the third week, he'd invited colleagues to the house without warning me, leaving me to hastily prepare refreshments. For strangers who eyed my modest home with barely concealed judgment, he rearranged furniture without asking, disposed of kitchen items he deemed outdated, and once I found him sorting through my financial documents that I kept in the desk drawer. "Just trying to help organize things," he explained when I questioned. "Mom, have you considered meeting with my financial advisor? I'm concerned about your retirement planning." The final straw came on a Sunday afternoon in early March. I had invited Susan and Michael for dinner, hoping to reunite my children around our family table. Susan brought her new boyfriend, and Michael arrived with a spectacular dessert he'd created himself. For a few precious hours, laughter filled my home again. After dinner, while I was in the kitchen making coffee, I overheard David speaking to his siblings in low tones. "We need to talk about Mom," he was saying. "She can't manage this house much longer. The repair bills alone will eat through her savings in no time." "She seems fine to me," Michael responded. "Mom's always been independent." "That's the problem," David insisted. "She doesn't realize how things are deteriorating, including her ability to maintain everything. I'm worried about her falling on those stairs or the roof leaking or the furnace, giving out in winter." "What are you suggesting?" Susan asked cautiously. "I think we need to consider assisted living options. There's a nice facility near my office in Boston. I've already gotten some information." I stepped into the dining room then, coffee pot in hand, my heart pounding. "I don't recall asking for your help with my living arrangements, David." The conversation halted abruptly. Susan looked embarrassed. Michael uncomfortable. David barely missed a beat. "Mom, we were just discussing options. You have to admit this house is becoming too much for you." "This house," I replied evenly, "is my home. I've maintained it quite well for 45 years, and I intend to continue doing so." The tension at the table was palpable. Susan quickly changed the subject, and Michael began serving his elaborately decorated cheesecake. But something fundamental had shifted, and we all felt it. After Susan and Michael left, David confronted me directly. "You're being unreasonable, Mom." "I'm trying to look out for your best interests." "By discussing putting me in a home behind my back?" I asked, the hurt evident in my voice. "An upscale retirement community," he corrected, "where you'd have proper care and social activities with people your own age." "I have friends. I have activities. I have a job I love, and a home I maintain perfectly well." He sighed with exaggerated patience. "Mom, you're 70. It's time to be practical about your limitations." "What limitations exactly?" "I work 30 hours a week, volunteer at the hospital on weekends, and just replanted the entire vegetable garden by myself." David paced the living room, frustration evident in every movement. "This isn't about your capabilities right now. It's about planning ahead. This house will become a financial drain and a physical burden. I'm trying to prevent a crisis before it happens." I studied my son's face, the boy I'd raised, the man I'd sacrificed for, and saw something I'd been missing for years. He wasn't concerned about my welfare. He was concerned about the inconvenience my aging might cause him. My independence wasn't a source of pride for him, but a temporary condition that threatened his carefully ordered plans. "David," I said quietly, "I appreciate your concern, but my living arrangements are not your decision to make." The argument escalated from there, with David listing every minor repair the house needed as evidence of my inability to cope. When I reminded him that I'd managed home maintenance while raising 3 children alone, he dismissed my experience as irrelevant in today's housing market. The next morning, David left early for work without saying goodbye. When he returned, that evening, he carried several glossy brochures from retirement communities and a folder of financial worksheets. "I've scheduled tours at 3 places next weekend," he announced, dropping the materials on the kitchen table. "The one in Boston is my top recommendation, but there are 2 local options if you insist on staying in this area." I didn't touch the brochures. "David, I've told you I'm not interested." "Mom, be reasonable. Your stubbornness isn't helping anyone." "My stubbornness," I repeated slowly. "Is that what you call my desire to live in my own home?" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father's that it momentarily softened my anger. "Look, I know change is scary at your age, but trust me, these places are fantastic. Restaurant-quality dining, fitness classes, movie nights. You'll make friends with people in your demographic." "My demographic," I echoed. "You mean old people." "Senior citizens," he corrected with that same condescending patience. "It's not like you'd be sitting around playing bingo all day. These are luxury communities with engaged residents." I looked at my son, trying to reconcile the man before me with the boy who'd once written me poetry on Mother's Day, who'd cried on my shoulder when his first girlfriend broke his heart, who'd promised his dying father he'd always take care of me. "David," I said finally, "I need you to hear me clearly. I'm not moving to a retirement community. Not now, not next year, not until I decide it's necessary. This conversation is over." His expression hardened. "You're making a mistake, Mom. A costly one." The following week brought a new dimension to this painful dance. David began inviting real estate agents to walk through my home without my permission or knowledge. I returned from the library one afternoon to find a strange woman with a clipboard in my living room. "Mrs. Thornton? I'm Brenda from Summit Properties. Your son asked me to do a market evaluation of the house." I was speechless with shock, then incandescent with anger. When David returned that evening, I confronted him immediately. "How dare you invite strangers into my home to assess its value?" He had the grace to look momentarily abashed before his expression shifted to defensive. "I'm trying to show you the options, Mom. This house is worth more than you think, even with its challenges. That equity could provide for your care for many years." "My care," I repeated, as if I'm already incapable of caring for myself. The argument that followed was like none we'd ever had. David finally revealed his true concern, that my potential decline would become his responsibility, disrupting the life he'd built with Elaine and Emma. "Be practical, Mom. What happens when you can't manage the stairs anymore? When you need regular medical care? When this house becomes too much? Do you expect me to drop everything in Boston and rush back here?" "I have never asked you to drop everything for me," I replied, my voice shaking. "Not once in your entire life," he scoffed. "That's not how it works. You won't ask, but the responsibility will fall to me anyway. I'm trying to put a plan in place now, before it becomes an emergency." That night, I lay awake for hours, the weight of my son's words pressing on my chest like stones. The boy I'd raised had grown into a man who saw me as a burden, a problem, to be managed rather than a person to be loved. More painful still was the realization that he believed he was being kind, even generous, by attempting to control my future without my consent. The following morning, David announced he would be spending the weekend in Boston with his family. "Think about what I've said while I'm gone, Mom. These brochures have virtual tours of the apartments. Just look at them, please. After he left, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by the glossy retirement community materials and allowed myself to cry. Not delicate tears, but body-racking sobs that came from the deepest part of me. I cried for the relationship I thought I had with my son, for the respect I believed I'd earned, for the independence that he seemed determined to strip away. When the tears finally subsided, I found myself staring at a photograph on my refrigerator, Richard. And me on our wedding day, young and radiant with possibility. What would you do? I whispered to his image. The answer came not in words, but in a memory. Richard standing firm against his own father, who had tried to dictate our housing choices when we were newlyweds. It's our life, Richard had said. We make our own decisions. Gradually, a plan began to form in my mind. Not a reaction born of hurt, but a deliberate choice to reclaim my agency. I spent the weekend making phone calls, reviewing documents, and coming to terms with a decision I never thought I'd have to make. When David returned Sunday evening, I was sitting in the living room with a single folder on the coffee table before me. Did you look at the brochures? He asked hopefully. I did more than that, I replied, my voice steady. I made a decision about my living situation. His face brightened. That's great, Mom. Which community interested you most? None of them, I said, sliding the folder toward him. I've decided to sell this house. Finally! Relief flooded his features. That's exactly what I've been... And I'm not buying another one, I continued. I've accepted a position as resident librarian at a literary retreat center in Arizona. It includes housing on the property, meals, and a modest salary to supplement my pension. David stared at me in confusion. Arizona? Mom, that's ridiculous. What about family? What about Emma? Emma has seen me 3 times in her life, David. All your talk about family rings rather hollow given that reality. But what about the house? He stammered. I opened the folder to reveal a contract. It's already in process. I've accepted an offer from a lovely young couple expecting their first child. The closing is in 30 days. Without consulting, me? His voice rose in disbelief. After all the work I've put into trying to help you? The last time I checked, David, I don't need my son's permission to sell my own property. I kept my tone gentle but firm. You've made it abundantly clear that you see me as a potential burden. I'm choosing not to be one. His expression cycled through shock, anger, and something like fear. Where will you stay until you move to Arizona? You can't possibly pack up this entire house in a month. Susan has offered her guest room while I sort through what to keep. Michael is helping with the packing. You told them before me? Indignation colored his voice. They asked what I wanted instead of telling me what I needed.